If you're not living under a rock, you probably heard about the Kove 450 Rally. That bike is out now for almost 2 years and everybody is talking about the specs, the hype, the Dakar marketing. But I haven't seen many people that actually take it on a real adventure trip. So I took that burden on me. For almost 5,000 kilometers I rode it from the freezing Swiss Alps to the blistering Sahara desert and back again. And during that time I really learned what that bike is for and who it's not made for. I'm Alan, this is MotoMotto TV. I fix, rebuild and occasionally abuse single cylinder engines until they reveal the true faces to me. So let's start why this bike actually caught my attention in the first place. For over 10 years my quest is to find the perfect adventure bike. And for now it's my Suzuki DRC 400e. It's built, reliable, it's also so playful, and after almost 10 years I still don't think about selling this one. But somehow the fuel range is a bit limited, and yeah, even though you can work a way around it, a 6th gear would be nice. So I'm always on the hunt for a bike that is light, fun off-road, but still powerful enough and doesn't require PhD in electronics in order to get it going again once you break down. No offense here, but the last bikes that really had that long-range desert DNA, that was probably the XT600C made 40 years ago. And since then, adventure bikes became surprisingly allergic to actual adventures. They either got fat, fragile or soft. And then finally, this creature here appeared. It kind of looks like Sid from Ice Age from the front, if you know what I mean. But it has that real Dakar DNA. So when that Kove 450 Rally 2024 model popped up at an auction, I had to slide in, I had to get that bike, and it had 53 kilometers on the clock, so I thought nothing could go wrong. But actually when picking it up, the honeymoon phase didn't start immediately. There was the cheap plastic smell, shifting felt really rough, and also the idle was kind of going up and down, and it was just feeling cheap, and the suspension was stiff as a board, even on the road. So when I came home I immediately drained all the oil. There was no oil side glass on this model, so I had no reference on how much oil there was in there. And after that oil change, that first oil change where there was also quite a bit of debris in there, the bike started shifting much better. It also ran smoother and it just started to feel better and better. I guess it really needed that kind of break in. And after then, for the next months, I took it for longer and longer rides just to figure out how the bike is and give it more and more throttle. And something changed. And from here on you can actually watch my older videos on the Kove where you see my emotional roller coaster on that bike. And of course, with that bike being almost brand new, I had to keep it stock. So let's go through all the modifications I did to that bike and how they actually improved or maybe even worsened the experience I had on it. So stock fueling was much too lean, the engine got hot, the throttle response wasn't really clean, and all the Euro 5 components, they just felt like they were slapped on last minute, and all the research and development were actually spent on the main core of the bike. So with the open airbox and the Cooper ECU, you get a much cooler running and smoother engine. The throttle is also usable more to the lower end, so you can use it from 3,500 RPMs instead of 4,000. But the downside is that drone that is absolutely obnoxious. Like, you need to have earplugs with the open airbox, but of course with that filter it's also getting better to filter out fine sand for the desert. So that's the main reason I did that mod. The bike is now still running a tad rich, I think, so I could still add in the decat pipe. That would have been fun, but yeah, I didn't order that, so I'm still running the stock exhaust with the Cooper ECU and the open air filter for that trip. The OEM fork bushings, they were absolutely trash. They had some mysterious white coating to it I've never seen before, and after roughly 1,000 kilometers of road use, they started to flake off. So I rebuilt the forks, I added some new oil in it, and of course used some Japanese Teflon bushings. You can use the ones from the CRF 450X, from the earlier models, from 2018 I guess I did. And with that the problem was solved, and there was no more wear on the fork extension. This particular bike also had almost zero sag in the rear, so I loosened the sag up so I get around 10 or 11 centimeters of rider sag without luggage on it, and that completely changed how the bike handled. I also installed a cheap AliExpress steering dampener. I set the low speed dampening almost to zero, so there was no resistance while slowly turning the bike, but the high speed resistance I cranked it up all the way, so if my wheel is getting flicked off by a rock, that will kind of catch on itself. I thought this would help me fix the high speed wobbles I get. The bike started getting shaky and it was quite violent, so I was really in fear of getting tank slapped above 110, 120 kilometers an hour. But actually that didn't solve it, but when I added the new tires, the Heidenau K60 Rangers, that issue was completely gone and the bike felt so stable. And yeah, of course, I balanced out the front wheel before doing that, but that didn't help. The seat concept seat was actually a great upgrade, because with the stock seat my ass was hurting after a long day of riding. It was unbearable. But with the seat concept seat it got much better, because it just got a wider base, so it distributes the weight over more space. Yeah, and then I just slapped some bags on it, one in the rear and one in the front here. One where I have my main luggage, and this one here was just for the camera and some tools and whatever I need on the road. And somewhere in Tunisia I got flagged down by this tourist. He told me he had the same bike like me in France, and he actually knows a secret. If I have that kind of jerky throttle where you roll on or off the throttle where it starts to bog. And he told me, yeah, trust me bro, you just need to unplug this little plug here and it will be gone. And I was like, yeah, sure, maybe not the best idea before heading into the desert, but yeah, let's try it. And then I removed the tank, I took the plug out, and the bike's behaviors immediately changed. And from figuring it out, it's kind of an idle adjustment screw, something you would find on a carbureted bike. And sometimes with aftermarket ECU, that system has issues with the ECU itself, where they kind of regulate back and forth, and that also is responsible for that rough idle that goes up and down and doesn't stay stable. So that changed, but now when I get to the cold weather, the bike is just a pain in the ass to start, and I think of reverting it back just because you don't have that choke feature anymore on it. Then before heading off, I actually wanted to send out my huge order to Uncle Wang's with bash plate and phone mount and luggage mount and whatnot. I forgot to order it, so it turns out you basically don't need that. Maybe the decat pipe, that would have been nice. Now let's talk about how it actually rides. For roads, this bike is so much fun because it's so smooth to roll on the throttle and decelerate and everything, and you can throw it into corners, it stays stable. You just need to be careful on tight hairpins because it's got a quite long wheelbase, and that's about it. It's such a nice bike. On fast gravel and everything kind of mixed, that's where the Kove absolutely starts to shine. It becomes a different animal, and high-speed gravel is just the natural habitat of it. You can let go of the bars, it self-stabilizes, the rear drifts are predictable, the front is just tracking like a laser beam, and ditches become jumps, potholes become irrelevant, and speed bumps, they become overtaken opportunities. In sand, even with 50/50 tires, that bike handles so well. You need to be careful so you don't stall the bike on low RPMs, but do not have them high enough to start digging in the rear. You need to kind of find the balance where you just float over it. If you get stuck in deep sand, the front wheel is surprisingly easy to maneuver around, but sometimes I also ended up kind of lifting the whole bike upside because the rear wheel was just dug in and it didn't want to move. So getting the rear out is really the pain. There are some handling points on the back of the bike but they're not really that comfortable to grip on, and the bike is also really heavy on the back, so it's not really easy to get it out alone if you're stuck in the sand. In slow rocky sections, it's probably the worst bike you could get. That stiff suspension, it also has a really long wheelbase. The bash plate is quite wide, which is nice for keeping your feet protected, but it will also get caught on rocks or whatnot. And it's also not really that easy to maneuver around. There's no oomph in the throttle, so it's not a trail bike for single trails. I cannot compare this bike to anything else on the market. I can only compare parts of it to it. So here's my best try. So for the weight feeling, you get that kind of DRC 400, CRF 450L, that's already a bit lighter, or an XR 650 kind of vibe. The suspension is more like a CRF 450R, like a motocross race bike. It has the stability even higher of an XR 650R, a desert race bike. And the road comfort is near something like an XT 600, where you can cruise along the road all day. For off-road focus, of course, that's much more than a Tenere 700. If the Tenere 700 is a road bike that can go off-road, this bike is an off-road bike that absolutely loves to go on the road. So during that time, I encountered some issues with the bike, and I'm just gonna list them out for you so you're maybe aware of some of them. So I had some flame outs at low RPM, especially in rocky sections where you kind of need to feather the clutch to roll the bike. It just started dying and you really need to use the clutch a lot. As for wind turbulence over 80 kilometers an hour, it's just, if you're doing that all day, and with the drone of the airbox, it's a lot. So earplugs are definitely mandatory, and maybe even a touring screen would be nice so the wind is getting deflected over your hair and doesn't just create turbulences around your ear. The oil cooler in the front gets a bit vulnerable to mud if you are riding in muddy or kind of over a salt lake or something like that. Better check it once in a while to make sure it doesn't clog up, because it's just right in front of the front wheel. It's a bit off center, so that helps, but 50% of it gets clogged up. If you watched my YouTube shorts, you know that my left front tank started leaking, basically coming from factory. I fixed that with Dirco, it holds up for now, but yeah, it's just something that shouldn't be on a new bike, I guess. Also the ABS, if you disable that while you're riding, it shows that it's disabled, but it's not disabled, and that can cause some scary situations if you're going downhill, maybe in sand. You think ABS is deactivated and it's not, but you just need to stop the bike, start rolling again, and then it's deactivated. While doing some air filter maintenance, I accidentally dropped the left fuel tank, and that caused the connector between the left and the right fuel tank to snap off. So that was still the plastic connectors. I didn't get the $100 metal ones. I put in some other ones now, but that then led to me having to remove that connector from the back, isolate the rear tank, and then move that connector to the front tanks. During the whole trip, I gave the bike 2 oil changes. It was not necessary, but I just love my engines. And I used some hair nets over the air filter to keep dust and sand away from it. And I replaced them just once or twice. If you're riding alone, there's no real dust getting into your air filter anyway, so that's a big plus. I cleaned the fork seals with that fork cleaning tool, and usually my fuel consumption was around 3.9 at the minimum to around 8 liters in the sand, and usually I average out at around 4.3 to 4.5 liters in mixed terrain. So that's quite nice and also gives you some proper range to it. After thousands of kilometers, what stayed with me was how real this bike feels. At first I absolutely hated it, and then I started to understand it and eventually starting to trust it. The more I pushed it, the better it got. It really made me feel like a rally rider. The Kove 450 rally isn't perfect, but it's honest. It's light enough to pick it up easily, it's capable enough to cruise all day, reliable enough to take it deep into unknown places. And it gets incredibly close to being my personal unicorn, with the only downside of it handling enduro terrain not as well as I would like to have it. I think that's still DRC territory. I'm Alan, this is MotoMotto TV. If you enjoyed this brutally honest review and you're curious to see what that bike looks like after the desert trip, click subscribe and follow the channel, and I'll be back for more. See you guys.